The folder made a sound when it hit the table. Not a loud sound. That's what I want you to understand first. Before anything else, it wasn't dramatic. Not the kind of crash you'd cut to in a movie. It was flat, dry. The sound a verdict makes when someone sets it down. The sound that says, "This is a document, and documents don't lie, and you are about to have a very bad Christmas afternoon." 22 people in my parents' dining room in Westerville, Ohio. The Kowalski cousins had claimed the folding table pulled from the garage, Tyler's youngest still working a candy cane she'd gotten from her stocking, the striped paper unraveling in her fist. My Aunt Barb's fork was midway to her mouth. Someone had brought a King Ranch casserole no one had touched. The Christmas candles were the pine-scented kind my mother buys every December from Target's dollar section, the wax gone soft from the oven heat, the whole house smelling of roast turkey and fake pine, and the specific kind of tension that doesn't announce itself until it's already sitting down at your table. My mother was crying. She'd been at it since roughly the 10-minute mark, when the conversation shifted from, "How is everyone's year?" to "Amy needs help with the new apartment." My mother cries the way some people sneeze in groups of 3. You see it coming. You brace. You wait for it to resolve. She was using a cloth napkin, which is a level of commitment I have always found telling. My father was at the head of the table. Gary Mitchell, 64 years old, a man who spoke in full sentences maybe 3 times a year and had chosen this as one of them. He pointed at me. Not a vague gesture, a point, forefinger extended, the kind he used to reserve for people who cut him off on Route 23. "Your sister is drowning," he said, "and you won't lift a finger." I let him finish. I let my mother finish the napkin phase. I let the table absorb it the way rooms absorb bad news slowly, and then all at once, everyone going still in sequence. Aunt Barb's fork made it back to her plate. Tyler's kids stopped with the candy cane. Someone's knee cracked under the table. I sat with my hands flat on my thighs and counted to 4, which is a technique I borrowed from nursing orientation years ago, before I ended up in administration instead. 4 counts of nothing. It's enough time to remember what you came to do. Then I pushed back my chair. My bag was by the door, black canvas tote, 3 years old, frayed handle on the left side that I keep meaning to replace. I carried it back to the table and set it down next to my plate. Reached in, took out a manila envelope, 9 by 12, tabbed along the right edge in 6 colors. I set it on the table between the centerpiece and my aunt's untouched King Ranch casserole. 6 years, I said. I kept my voice at a normal register, because I have never needed volume. $214,000. 23 wire transfers. 147 pages. I opened the first tab, Emergency Housing, Year 1. A bank statement from my personal checking account, January of 6 years ago, showing a transfer of $18,000 to a property management company in Clintonville. My name in the memo line. I always put my name in the memo line. 11 years in hospital administration will do that to you. This reflexive need to document everything, including things nobody will ever think to audit. I slid the page to the center of the table. That's what lifting a finger looks like. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father turned his head not toward me, not toward the folder, but toward the window behind him. Suddenly very interested in the backyard. Nothing was in the backyard. There is never anything in the backyard in December in Columbus, just frost on the grass and the neighbor's gutters pulling loose at the south corner. Amy was at the far end of the table. She was looking at her plate. She'd been looking at her plate since I reached into the bag, which told me everything the past 6 years had already suggested, in smaller ways, in rooms with fewer witnesses. I closed the folder, slid it back into the bag, picked up my coat from the back of the chair, stood, and reached over for the green bean casserole dish. I'd made it that morning, the real version, with fresh beans and the fried onions from scratch, not the canned kind. My name was on the masking tape on the bottom. I was not leaving it. "Merry Christmas," I said. I walked to the door and pulled it shut behind me. Not a slam, just the soft mechanical click of a latch catching. Honestly, the more devastating sound. A slam is feeling. A click is a conclusion. The porch. 3 seconds, maybe 4. The street was quiet the way it goes quiet on Christmas afternoon, after the morning is done and the kids have moved inside, and the neighborhood hands itself over to that particular stillness that sits halfway between peace and exhaustion. Down the block, someone's old-fashioned string of lights kept blinking on, off, the kind of set where the whole strand goes when one bulb does. Someone had found the problem and fixed it, apparently. The lights kept blinking anyway. I walked to my car, but I should start from the beginning, because the folder was 6 years of something, and for you to understand what it cost, to put together what it meant to carry it into that house in a canvas tote bag with a frayed handle, to set it on the Christmas table between the centerpiece and a casserole nobody touched, you need to start where I started. 6 years ago. 2 in the morning. My phone on the nightstand, screen lighting up with my sister's name. Let me tell you about the call. 6 years earlier, my life fit into a spreadsheet. Not the one I kept for Amy, that one came later. I mean the general kind, the tab for my student loan balance, which I'd been chipping down for 4 years and could now see the bottom of, the tab for my savings account, which had crossed $20,000 the previous April and which I'd marked with a small asterisk and no other comment, because I don't celebrate things so much as note them. The tab for my grocery budget, which ran about $80 a week and which I had never once exceeded, not because I couldn't afford to, but because I liked knowing I hadn't. I'd been promoted 8 months before. I was senior coordinator for patient services at Mount Carmel East, which meant I managed a team of 12 and handled about 40 appeals a week and rarely left before 6:30, but I was building something. The apartment was small and entirely mine and smelled like coffee, and the faint industrial smell of the dry cleaning I picked up every other Thursday. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was a life I had made from scratch and documented as I went. My phone lit up at 2:17 a.m., Amy's name. I was awake, I'd been awake. I don't sleep deeply even in ordinary circumstances, and those were ordinary circumstances. I picked up on the second ring. Her voice was wrong. Not crying would have been easier to parse. It was flat, controlled in the specific way that people go controlled when they're holding something back that is very large and they are not sure what will happen if they stop holding. She gave me an address on Olentangy River Road and said, "I need you to come get me." I didn't ask why. I got dressed. The address was a 1-bedroom in a building I'd never had reason to notice, 3 blocks from a Kroger on the north side. The lobby buzzer system half broken, so she had to come down to let me in. Lily was 18 months old and asleep in a portable crib in the corner of the living room, surrounded by a ring of stuffed animals that someone, Amy, presumably, in whatever window of time she'd had, arranged around her with some care. Amy was at the kitchen table in a sweatshirt with the hood up even though the apartment wasn't cold. She had a mug in front of her. The tea had gone cold. She was pregnant. 6 months? Maybe 7, I could see it plainly even through the sweatshirt. I didn't say anything about that either. She pushed her sleeve up partway to reach for the mug and then stopped, resettled it. There was a bruise on her forearm, yellow-green at the edges, older than a few days. I noted it the way I note a flagged insurance code. Something is wrong here, and the source of the wrongness is no longer in question. And what matters now is the documentation and the next step. I filled the kettle and found the tea bags in the cabinet above the stove. Because in every kitchen in America, the tea bags are in the cabinet above the stove, and I made her a fresh cup and set it down and sat across from her. She looked at the mug for a while, then she said, "I know you tried to warn me. Making tea in a crisis is not a solution. It is something to do with your hands while the other person finds the words." I kept my hands around my own mug, which was empty, and I did not say the things I could have said, which were true and would have been useless, and I waited. "He's gone," she said. "He cleared out last night." I opened my laptop. Franklin County Domestic Violence Resources. Legal Aid. Restraining Order Procedures. Ohio. I pulled up the county court's website and found the filing instructions and read through them once, the way you read a patient intake form looking for what's required, what's optional, what the timeline looks like. Then I opened my banking app. Amy watched me without asking what I was doing. I transferred $3,000 to her account. Memo line. Emergency housing. I put my name in the memo because I always put my name in the memo, and because I already understood, sitting in that kitchen at 3 in the morning, that this would not be the last transfer. I closed the app and set the laptop aside. "I'll send you the number for a lawyer tomorrow," I said. "She handles protective orders. She's good." Amy nodded. She drank the tea. Before I left, I went and checked on Lily. She was on her back in the portable crib, one fist tucked under her chin, the other flat against the mattress, her face doing the particular slack thing faces do in deep sleep when there is no performance left in them at all. Someone had put her in a onesie with small yellow ducks on it. A corner of her blanket had slipped down, and I reached in and pulled it back up, and then stood there for a moment with my hand on the crib rail, looking at her in the dark. I went back to the kitchen and told Amy to lock the deadbolt after I left. The drive home was 20 minutes on 315 with no traffic at that hour, the highway nearly empty, the Columbus skyline doing its usual modest thing in the rear view. The windows started fogging somewhere around the Henderson Road exit, and I turned the defroster up. I thought about the wedding, not the whole of it, just one specific frame of it. Myself standing at the reception with a champagne glass, smiling at something one of the groomsmen said. I had known by then what I knew, and I had smiled anyway, because the wedding had already happened, and knowing and smiling was the only available option, and I was very good at available options. I got home at 4:20. I did not call my parents. I did not call anyone. I opened my spreadsheet, not the loan tab, not the savings tab, but a new one. I labeled it Home Repairs Fund, because nobody ever looks twice at a spreadsheet called Home Repairs Fund. I entered the first line, January, $3,000. I put it in the column I labeled Transferred. Then I went to bed. That was the first brick. I laid 211,000 more one at a time over the next 6 years. I kept thinking I was almost done. I kept thinking Amy was almost stable, that I'd be able to close the tab soon, that I'd get to open a different one. I never did. Not until the folder was full. The first thing you need to understand about what I built is that it was never supposed to be permanent. I told myself that in year 1, I would cover the immediate costs, the housing deposit, the attorney's retainer, the first months of rent, and then Amy would stabilize, and I would close the tab, and that would be the end of it. I had a plan. I always have a plan. I work in healthcare administration. I process appeals. I manage timelines. I maintain documentation so thorough that my predecessor left me a note on her last day that said simply, "Rachel, you are the only person in this building who will never need a lawyer to prove what she did." I thought that was a compliment. I still think it was a compliment. Forming an LLC in Ohio costs $125 and takes about 20 minutes online, which is considerably less complicated than most of the things it eventually enabled me to do. I registered Mitchell Home Services LLC in March of year 1, technically for the rental unit I owned on the east side, practically for the paper trail. Running transfers through an LLC is cleaner, less exposure. If anyone had ever looked, they would have seen property management expenses, which nobody looks at twice. I built a second tab into the spreadsheet for receipts and labeled it Vendor Invoices. Then I set a calendar reminder every first of the month labeled Home Admin, so I wouldn't forget. Amy's restraining order came through in April. Derek Holt, Franklin County, case number 21DR04471. I entered it in the spreadsheet under a column I called Notes, not because I needed the case number, I wasn't her attorney, but because I had learned, after 11 years of processing insurance disputes, that the detail you don't record is always the one someone asks for later. Derek left Ohio by summer. Amy found a 2-bedroom in Clintonville, 3 blocks from a decent public library. I paid the deposit and the first 2 months directly. Jake was born in September, small, early, healthy. I noted it, September, year 1. Jake, 6 pounds 4 ounces, doing well. 1 line. I am not sentimental about documentation. Year 2, Amy started therapy. She found the practice herself, a group on North High Street that specialized in trauma. I called them on a Tuesday afternoon and gave the receptionist my card and said I'd be covering the invoices for Amy Holt. The receptionist didn't ask who I was. She said, "Sure, we can do that," in the specific tone of someone who has had this conversation before and finds it unremarkable. $2,200 a month for Amy, $800 for Lily, who was 2.5 and apparently had opinions about loud voices that a child psychologist was helping her work through. I didn't push for details. I paid the invoices when they came. Jake started doing the thing toddlers do where they repeat a word until it means something up, up, up when he wanted to be carried. Ma for milk. Rach somehow, eventually for me, though I was only there on alternating Sundays. Lily started preschool in September. Her backpack had a frog on it. I know because Amy sent a photo to the family group text. Lily in the driveway squinting in the morning sun. Enormous backpack. The frog's eyes lined up roughly with her shoulder blades. My mother texted back 3 heart emojis. My father sent a thumbs up. I sent, "So big. Have a great day, Lil." My mother called me that evening. Not about Lily. About Amy, how well she was doing, considering everything. How strong she was. how she'd gotten herself back on her feet without asking anyone for anything. I was at my kitchen table when she called, laptop open, looking at that month's transfer confirmation from Mitchell Home Services LLC to North High Trauma Associates. "That's great, Mom," I said. "She doesn't complain," my mother said. "She just handles it. That's just who she is." "I know," I said. I hung up. I went back to the transfer confirmation. $2,200. $800. My name in the memo because I always put my name in the memo. I closed the laptop and washed the 2 dishes in my sink and went to bed at 9:15. I did not call my mother back. There was nothing to say that I was ready to say. Year 3 was Easter. My parents hosted, the way they do every year, spiral ham, the green Jell-O mold nobody eats, deviled eggs made from my grandmother's recipe, which involves an amount of relish that I have always considered aggressive. The Kowalski cousins were there, Aunt Barb, with the good wine she brings out at holidays, and the bad wine she drinks herself. The new neighbors from down the street, the Hendersons, had been invited, retired couple, cheerful, recently moved from Cincinnati. Amy came with Lily and Jake. Jake was 1.5, round-cheeked and serious, not yet walking steadily, still holding onto furniture as he went. Lily was 3 and had recently become very interested in worms, which she discussed at length with anyone who sat still. I was by the kitchen counter, deviled egg on a paper plate, when I heard my mother steer the Hendersons toward Amy. "This is my younger daughter," she said. I could hear the pride arranging itself in her voice, the specific warmth she reserved for a story she was proud of. She's been through so much these past couple years, raised those 2 little ones practically on her own, done it herself, start to finish. Mrs. Henderson looked at Amy the way people look at someone who has survived something. "That must have been so hard," she said, "doing it alone with 2 little ones." Amy smiled. She is a good smiler natural, the kind that reaches the eyes. "It was," she said. "But you do what you have to do." I ate the deviled egg. It needed more relish, actually. My grandmother was right about the relish. Then I went to get a glass of water and stood at the sink for a minute, looking out the window at the backyard, which in April had the defeated look of a lawn that had survived winter and wasn't sure yet what came next. That evening, I opened the spreadsheet and added a line to the notes column. Year 3, month 4. Easter. Amy said, "You do what you have to do." Documented. I had started doing that logging things, Amy said. Not the financial items. Those had their own columns. These were a different kind of record. I told myself it was habit. The documentation reflex of someone who spent 10 hours a day building paper trails for other people's decisions. But that wasn't quite it. And somewhere below the habit was a reason I wasn't looking at directly yet. I closed the laptop. I kept adding to it anyway. By year 4, I had started to think I could see the end of it. Not the end of caring about Amy and the kids, that wasn't something with an end. But the end of the financial arrangement, the monthly transfers, the invoices from North High Street Trauma Associates that arrived in my email on the 15th of every month, with the same subject line, Statement Mitchell Home Services LLC. Amy had been working part-time at a pediatric clinic on the east side since the previous spring. Not much 12 hours a week at the front desk, but enough to cover groceries with something left over. Lily had started first grade at the public school 2 blocks from Amy's apartment, which had a good rating and a librarian who apparently did voices during story time, a detail Lily mentioned every time I saw her. Jake, 2.5, had opinions about everything, mostly expressed at significant volume. He was fine. They were both fine. The therapy was working. Amy had stopped rescheduling her appointments. That was what I had been working toward. And for a while in year 4, it genuinely looked like it was working. Then Amy called on a Thursday afternoon in August. She didn't lead with anything. No preamble, no context setting. "There's a CNA program through Columbus State," she said. "Certified nursing assistant. 16 weeks, nights and weekends, so I can keep the clinic job. $4,800 for the full program." A pause, not long. I looked into financial aid. The income threshold is too high. She had looked into it before calling me. Of course she had. "Send me the enrollment link," I said. She sent it. I paid the program fee online that afternoon, charged to the card I kept specifically for Mitchell Home Services expenses. I opened the spreadsheet and added the line. August, year 4. CNA program, Columbus State. $4,800. I filed the confirmation email in a folder labeled Vendor Receipts Education. Then I made dinner and watched 40 minutes of something on television and went to bed. What I did not do was examine the phone call too carefully. The matter-of-factness of it. The way she said the income threshold is too high as a piece of information rather than a complaint. The way she waited exactly long enough for the pause to register before moving on. The way she did not say thank you, had not said it in some time. The same way you don't thank the floor for being there when you step on it. I filed that away in the same column I filed the receipt. I did not label it. 3 weeks later, my mother called. "Just checking in," she said, which is what she says when she is not just checking in. We talked about the weather, that September had come in cooler than expected, which was either a good sign or a bad one, depending on the winter. We talked about my Aunt Barb, who had a new neighbor with a dog that barked. Then my mother said, "Did you hear about Amy's program? The CNA certification," I said. "Isn't it wonderful?" The pride in her voice was real. That's the thing I want to be accurate about. My mother is not performing when she talks about Amy. She means it, every word, which is its own particular problem. She saved up for it herself, just decided she wanted to do it, and did it. You know how she is. I was at the kitchen table. My phone in my left hand, a mug of coffee cooling on the placemat in front of me. The laptop was open. I'd been reviewing claims before she called. One of those Tuesday night work overflow situations that I'd long since stopped finding unusual. 14 items in the queue. I'd been on the third one when the phone rang. "That's really great, Mom," I said. 16 weeks, nights and weekends. And she still kept her job at the clinic the whole time. "Your father said the same thing he said, Carol. That girl is something else." A brief pause, the emphasis kind. "And she is. She really is. She works hard," I said. "She never asked anyone for a single dime." My mother said it with a specific satisfaction, the voice she uses when a thing she believes has been confirmed by evidence. "That girl has more pride than the two of us combined." $96,000. That was the running total at that point. I didn't have to open the spreadsheet to know it. I knew it the way I know the appeals processing timeline or the copay structure for our preferred network, because I had entered every line myself, and some numbers settle into your memory without being asked. $96,000 and not a single dime. "That's just who she is," I said. "She handles things. She really does." A small sound of pleasure from my mother, the kind that means she's settling in. "I keep telling your father you don't have to worry about Amy. She'll always land on her feet." Then, "How are you, sweetheart? You sound tired." "I'm fine. Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine, Mom." "You work too hard." This is something she says to me reliably, with genuine concern, which I have always found notable given the rest of the conversation. "Have you talked to Amy lately? You should call her more. She could use her sister right now." The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere in the building above me, someone was moving furniture, the slow scrape of something heavy across hard wood. My coffee had gone completely cold. "I know," I said. "I will." "Good. Okay. I love you, sweetheart." "Love you, Mom." I set the phone down on the table. I did not move it for a while. The furniture upstairs had stopped moving. The building had gone quiet in the particular way it does on weeknights. Everyone retreated into their respective silences, the whole structure holding its breath. Outside, the September evening was doing what September evenings do in Columbus, cooling fast, the light going amber in that specific way that makes everything look like it's already been photographed. I looked at the coffee. I looked at the laptop, still open on the claims queue, item 3 of 14 waiting exactly where I'd left it. I looked at the phone. Then I opened the spreadsheet. Not the financial columns, those were current, balanced, documented to the penny. The notes column. I scrolled to the next empty cell and typed, Year 4, Month 9. Mom said, "She never asked anyone for a single dime. On file." I sat there for a moment after I'd typed it, cursor blinking in the empty cell below. My parents had built a story. Amy the survivor, Amy the capable, Amy who did it alone with her head down and her pride intact. It was a good story, the kind that holds a family together at Easter, that gives a mother something to say to the new neighbors, that lets a father nod from the head of the table without having to know any details. It required very little maintenance. It only asked one thing, that nobody look behind it. And nobody was going to look behind it because nobody had any reason to, and the person who had the most reason wasn't talking. I was not in this story. I was something else. The room where the story was staged. The lights that made it visible. The floor that didn't get thanked for being there. I closed the laptop. I was very good at available options. I always had been. Year 5 started with Jake's appendix. October Tuesday evening. Rachel had her jacket half off at her desk at Mount Carmel when Amy's name lit up the phone. Not a text, a call, which was unusual enough that she answered mid-shrug, jacket still on one shoulder. Jake had been complaining of stomach pain since Sunday. Amy had taken him to urgent care that morning, been told it was probably a virus, went home. By Tuesday afternoon, he was running 103 and had stopped eating. The ER doctor at Nationwide Children's knew within 20 minutes. Rachel drove to the hospital. She didn't tell Amy she was coming, she just came. Arriving at the waiting room on the 3rd floor at 9:40, with 2 coffees from the vending machine on the 2nd floor, the kind that comes out more beige than brown but is hot. She sat with Amy for 4 hours. Jake came out of surgery at 1:50 in the morning, groggy and irritable and fine, completely fine. The surgeon said appendix was textbook, no complications, he'd be home in 2 days. Amy started crying in the specific releasing way of someone who had been not crying for 6 hours. Rachel drove home on 270 at 2:30, with no other cars on the highway, and the October sky doing something large and black overhead. She did not cry. She was tired in the specific way that has no solution except sleep. The next morning, she called the hospital billing department before her own shift started. She knew the process, she'd worked adjacent to it for 11 years. She paid the estimate up front, $41,000, the full projected balance before insurance adjudication, because paying up front sometimes reduced the total and always reduced the timeline, and she did not want Amy navigating a billing dispute on top of everything else. She entered it in the spreadsheet that evening. October, year 5. Jake appendectomy, Nationwide Children's, $41,000. 3 weeks later, a Tuesday again, late November, 11 p.m. She opened the spreadsheet to reconcile. The total read $174,000. She stared at it for a while. Not in shock, she had been updating this number incrementally for 5 years, and it had never surprised her. Not really. But seeing it as a single figure, the full accumulated weight of it in one cell, was different from knowing it line by line. $174,000. She was 35 years old and had spent the last 5 years moving $174,000 from her accounts to Amy's life. She opened a second tab. Her 401k. The employer match was current. The hospital contributed 3% regardless of her input, which she had always considered decent of them. Her own voluntary contributions. The last entry was 14 months ago. She had stopped without quite deciding to stop. The way you stop calling someone without quite deciding not to call them. 1 month it didn't happen, then another, then the habit had dissolved, and she was only finding out now, looking at the date of the last deposit. She had $47,000 in retirement savings. She was 35. By any reasonable projection, she should have had double that. She opened another tab. Her PTO balance. She had accrued the maximum allowable 240 hours, which the hospital system capped automatically and then converted to a cash payout twice a year if not used. She had taken that payout both times. She had not taken more than 3 consecutive days off in 4 years. She opened another tab. Lily's $529 college savings account, which she had set up 2 years ago, $200 a month, currently sitting at just under $5,000. She looked at the tabs for a while. 5 of them open across the top of the screen. Home Repairs Fund, $401k, PTO, Lily's $529, and the bank account where her paycheck arrived and where money stayed briefly before moving somewhere else. There was no tab for herself. Not a savings account, not a travel fund, not a retirement supplement, nothing that had her name on it as a beneficiary rather than a contributor. She had a $401k with employer match and a checking account that moved money out faster than it accumulated. That was the whole of it. She closed the laptop. In the bathroom, she ran cold water over her wrists, a habit she'd developed sometime in the past few years when she needed to stay present in her own body. The shock of temperature, a kind of reset. She ran it longer than usual. Then she looked up. The mirror in her bathroom is the basic kind that comes with the apartment, the silver-backed rectangle above the sink that she had never replaced because replacing it required a trip to a home goods store, and she had never quite had the afternoon for it. She looked at herself in it. 35 years old. Hair she'd meant to cut 2 months ago. The particular face of someone who has been awake since 6 and is still awake at 11 and is not sure what she is doing at the sink at this hour. Not what she was doing for Amy. She knew what she was doing for Amy. The answer to that question was documented to the penny. 174,000 and counting. Organized by year and category with a notes column. What she was doing for herself. The question arrived the way a bad lab result reads when you already suspected the diagnosis. Quietly. Like information. Was I paying because I loved her? Or was I paying because I needed to? Because if she kept paying, if she kept the transfers running, and the spreadsheet current, and the invoices filed under vendor receipts, she didn't have to think about the fact that she had stood in that church with a champagne glass and she had smiled. She had said the right things at the right moments. She had toasted a marriage she knew was going to break her sister, and she had done it with good posture, because that was what was available to her at the time. And then Derek had broken Amy exactly the way Rachel had predicted, and Rachel had spent 5 years paying for it. The question was, which of those two things was the payment for? She didn't answer it. She stood at the sink until the water went cold on her wrists, and her hands went slightly numb and the bathroom mirror fogged at the edges from the steam that had been there earlier when she'd showered and then cleared, and fogged again. Or maybe she was imagining that part. She turned off the tap. She went back to the kitchen. The laptop was closed on the table, the 5 tabs still open inside it in the dark, waiting. She left it there. She turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. She lay in the dark for a while without thinking about anything in particular. This was either peace or avoidance. She had learned, sometime in the past 5 years, that there was not always a useful difference between the two. By morning, the spreadsheet was the same. The number was the same. Nothing she had done or not done in the bathroom had changed any of the documented facts. But the spreadsheet was not the same document it had been yesterday, or last month, or for the past 5 years. The number hadn't changed. The columns were current, the receipts filed, the notes column waiting. What had changed was what she'd told herself it proved. It had been, for 5 years, proof of something: love, obligation, penance. She had cycled through all 3 words at different points without settling on one. Now she was no longer certain any of them were accurate. The question she hadn't answered was still there, the way a question that doesn't get answered stays there, patient, in the same place you left it, waiting for you to come back. She got up, she made coffee, she went to work. She did not close the notes column. She did not add a new entry. Not yet. The final transfer went through on a Wednesday morning in late November. $73,000, the down payment on Amy's apartment on Indianola Avenue. A 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a building with good bones and a parking spot, the kind of place you could own rather than rent indefinitely and then have nothing to show for the years spent there. Rachel had handled the wire the same way she'd handled all the others. Logged in, amount entered, memo line filled, confirm. She'd been doing it for so long that the interface no longer required her to read the prompts. Her hands knew the sequence. She opened the spreadsheet afterward and updated the total. $214,000. She stared at the number for a moment. Then she typed, in the notes column, Year 6, final transfer. Amy's apartment down payment, $73,000. File closed. On paper, she was done. She has always been skeptical of on paper. She closed the laptop and went back to the claims queue. 4 weeks later, the day before Thanksgiving, her parents hosted what Carol called the early gathering, the close family only. 12 people, scheduled the day before the actual holiday because some of the Kowalski cousins drove to Cincinnati for Turkey Day and didn't come back until Sunday. It was smaller than Christmas, less orchestrated. Gary grilled turkey breast on the back deck because the oven was full. Aunt Barb brought a green bean casserole, the canned kind, with the French fried onions from a container, which Rachel ate without comment. Rachel brought a pecan pie she'd made from scratch, the filling properly set, which she considered a minor personal achievement and mentioned to no one. Amy came with Lily and Jake. Lily was in a phase where she refused to wear anything without pockets and had arrived in a corduroy jumper with 4 of them. Jake, 5 years old and newly certain about everything, had opinions about where to sit and express them. They were both fine. Lily showed Rachel a loose tooth. Jake ate 3 rolls and had to be redirected from a 4th. It was a normal early Thanksgiving gathering. Rachel stood at the kitchen counter and sliced the pie and watched it be a normal gathering and let herself, for a few minutes, believe that was what it was. Carol had been telling Aunt Barb about the apartment since they'd arrived. Rachel could hear it from the kitchen. Carol had a voice that carried, always had, a teacher's projection that she'd never unlearned. She bought it, Barb, on her own. I don't know how she managed it on a CNA salary, but that's Amy. Stubborn as a mule. Aunt Barb made the appropriate sounds of admiration. Rachel lifted a slice of pie onto a plate and set it aside for Lily, who had requested a small piece with no nuts, which was a reasonable position. She was reaching for the next slice when she heard Amy speak. It took a lot of sacrifice. 3 words that were technically true and were also, in the way that technically true things can be, something else entirely. Not hard work, not saving up or cutting back or careful planning. Sacrifice. The word was precise in a way that accidents don't produce. Amy had selected it from all the available words and placed it in front of Aunt Barb and Carol and Gary, who was coming in from the deck with the turkey, and the word sat there in the kitchen of her parents' house doing exactly what Amy intended it to do. Rachel looked up from the counter. Amy was looking at her, not the way you catch someone's eye by accident across a room, the slight startle, the brief nod, the moving on. This was deliberate. Amy had turned from Aunt Barb and was looking directly at Rachel from across the kitchen, a distance of maybe 15 feet, and her expression was not what Rachel had expected to see there after 6 years of silence. It was not guilt. Guilt is a closed-in expression. It wants to apologize or explain or shrink from what it knows about itself. What Amy's face was doing was more open than guilt and more terrible. She was looking at Rachel the way you look at someone you owe a debt so large that acknowledging it would require dismantling the entire story of your life, gratitude and dread, in the same arrangement of features, the face of someone who knows exactly what they owe and has made their decision about whether to pay it. Rachel held the look. 1 second, 2, 3. Amy looked away first. She turned back to Aunt Barb and said something about the view from the 2nd floor. And Aunt Barb said that sounded lovely. And Carol said she was just so proud. And Gary set the turkey on the counter and asked if anyone had seen the carving fork. The kitchen resumed. Everything resumed. Rachel set down the pie knife. She walked to the bathroom at the end of the hallway and ran cold water over her wrists and stood there until the feeling in her hands was more temperature than anything else. The bathroom had a framed print on the wall, a watercolor of sunflowers her mother had bought at a craft fair 15 years ago, and which had moved through 3 rooms of this house without ever being replaced. Rachel had spent a significant amount of time looking at it over the years, in various states of needing to be somewhere other than the kitchen. She looked at it now, then she dried her hands on the good towel and went back out. She ate Thanksgiving dinner at her parents' table. She had seconds of the turkey and told Gary the brine had worked. She helped Lily excavate the loose tooth over the sink after dessert, which came out without drama and was wrapped in a paper towel and placed in Lily's left pocket. She said her goodbyes at 8:30 and drove home on 71 South with the radio off. She was home by 9. She opened her laptop and she opened the spreadsheet, not the summary tab, not the notes column, but the full file, all 6 years, all 147 pages of it. Wire confirmations and invoices and bank statements and the case number from Franklin County and therapy receipts and school enrollment forms and a pediatric surgical bill from Nationwide Children's Hospital. Everything she had entered and saved and filed for 6 years because she had learned long ago that the detail you don't record is always the one someone asks for later. She spent 2 hours compiling it into a single document, the way she compiled discharge packets at work methodically, in order, with tabbed sections. She labeled them the way she labeled everything, clearly, specifically, without flourish. Emergency housing, legal fees, therapy, education, medical, housing. 6 tabs for 6 years. 147 pages. $214,000. She printed the full document at the office printer the next morning and put it in a manila envelope, 9 by 12, and tabbed the right edge in 6 colors so the sections were findable without hunting. She put her name in the upper left corner of the envelope, the way she put her name in every memo line, because she had always known this day would come and she had always intended to be legible when it did. Then she put the envelope in her bag, the black canvas tote with the frayed left handle, and she left it there. 3 weeks until Christmas. 22 relatives in that house. She knew exactly what she was going to do. The folder had been on her kitchen table for 3 weeks. She had moved it once from the table to the counter, then back because it was the kind of object that had its own gravitational logic and didn't belong anywhere else. 9 by 12. Rubber banded. Inside the black canvas tote. She walked past it every morning to make coffee, and every evening coming home, and it was always there. The 3 weeks had gone by in what she could only call organized dissociation. She reviewed claims, she did her grocery shopping, she called her mother twice and said everything was fine. It was Christmas Eve, 6:14 p.m. Her phone rang. Ame. The first call, not a text since Thanksgiving. Rachel answered on the second ring. Hey. Amy's voice had the quality of someone who had rehearsed. Merry Christmas. I just wanted to pause, the sentence unfinished. Whatever was at the end of it staying there. Are you coming tomorrow? Yes, Rachel said. Okay. Longer than a beat. Good. The line stayed open. She could hear Jake somewhere in the background. A question about something. Lily's voice answering. The ordinary sounds of a Tuesday evening in Amy's apartment, the life Rachel had spent 6 years funding, running normally on the other side of a phone call. She waited. Amy didn't say it. See you tomorrow, Amy, Rachel said. Yeah. See you. She put the phone face down on the table and sat there. She almost called her mother to say she was sick, a headache, something possibly contagious. Carol would say rest. And 2 minutes later, the folder went in the recycling, and that was the end of it. She almost put the folder in the recycling without the phone call. Just undid 3 weeks of work quietly, the spreadsheet still existing if she ever needed it. She almost just didn't go, no excuse, no explanation. The silence continuing, 6 years becoming 7. The weight of being right, she had learned, is not always lighter than the weight of being wrong. She sat with the folder on the table and thought about the wedding. Not the whole day. 2 moments worn smooth from handling. The first was before the engagement party, Amy's apartment spring. She had pulled her mother into the kitchen and said, quietly, that she was worried about Derek, the specific things, the outfit he'd chosen for Amy to wear, the way he'd interrupted her twice, the joke at her expense that landed slightly wrong. Her mother had looked at her with the expression she reserved for information she'd decided not to receive. You're reading into things. You're jealous because she found someone. Rachel had tried again. Her mother had said, with the finality of a drawer being shut, stop stirring things up. This is a happy night. Rachel had gone back to the party and congratulated Derek and held it together for 4 hours. The second was the wedding. 8 months later. She stood at the altar in the bridesmaid dress, dusty rose, bouquet in both hands. Derek at the front, watching the door. When Amy came through his face, the look of someone receiving something they decided was theirs. Rachel had stood with her posture and her professional expression and had not moved. At the reception, someone said something funny and she had laughed. Genuinely. Because the joke was funny. She'd stood there in the dusty rose dress with a champagne glass, laughing a real laugh, and beneath it was everything she knew, that she had said what needed to be said, that nobody had listened, that in 8 months she would be driving to Amy's apartment at 2 a.m. That was the story of her life in this family. Say the truth, be dismissed, find another way. Not this time. The thought arrived quietly. She was not a dramatic person. Not this time, and not because she needed to be vindicated. The point was Lily, who was 7, and Jake, who was 5, and the fact that someday they would be old enough to ask how they got here, the apartment, the therapy, the surgery, the whole held-together shape of a life after everything fell apart. There was a version of that story with Rachel in it, and a version that didn't have her. She was the only person in that family who could determine which one survived. She picked up the bag and set it by the door. She made pasta, something that required watching the clock and nothing else, and ate it standing at the counter. She washed the pot. She read a few pages of the novel she hadn't finished. She set her alarm for 9 a.m. She went to sleep. She arrived at noon with the green bean casserole and her name on the masking tape on the bottom of the dish. She set it on the counter, hugged people, hung her coat over the back of a chair. She set her bag on the floor by the door. Nobody asked what was in the bag. At 1:30, Lily was at her elbow with a piece of paper. Aunt Rachel, I made you a drawing. A house, a square with windows and a door, a tree out front, done in green and orange marker. Above the door, in the careful capitals of a 7-year-old proud of her handwriting, our house. It's beautiful, Lil, Rachel said. She meant it. She folded the drawing and put it in her coat pocket. She sent Lily and Jake upstairs. The kids ate at the folding table and were dispatched upstairs to a movie at 4, and the adults moved to the main table and Christmas dinner began. 22 people. Gary at the head. Rachel had the green bean casserole and the king ranch. She ate. She passed things. The bag sat by the door. Carol, wine in hand her second, had her phone out showing Dennis, Aunt Barb's husband, photos of Amy's new apartment. Can you believe she bought it herself? Gary nodded from the head of the table. Someone asked whether Amy needed anything else for the new place. Carol looked at Rachel. Rachel, you should pitch in toward a couch. You're doing well. It would mean a lot. I've been helping Amy, Rachel said, quietly. I mean financially. Carol's voice carried the tone of someone clarifying a misunderstanding. She works so hard. Gary put his fork down. Your sister is drowning. His voice had changed the volume he used when he'd chosen a side. 6 years she's been doing this alone, and you can't be bothered to step up. The table went quiet. Aunt Barb's fork stopped midway. Tyler's youngest quit unwrapping the candy cane from her stocking. 22 people, none of them breathing normally. Rachel put her hands flat on her thighs and counted to 4. Then she looked at Amy. Amy was looking at the table. The tablecloth, the specific weave of it more interesting, apparently, than anything in the room. Rachel looked at her for exactly as long as it took to understand what she was looking at. She pushed her chair back, walked to the door, picked up the bag, and carried it back to the table. She took out the manila envelope 9 by 12, tabbed in 6 colors, and set it down. The room was silent. 6 years, she said. $214,000. 23 wire transfers. Every receipt. Every copay. Every rent deposit. Jake's surgery, $41,000. Lily's school, 3 years. Amy's certification. The down payment on that apartment. She opened the first tab. Emergency housing year 1. Her bank statement. $18,000. Rachel A. Mitchell in the memo line, because she always put her name in the memo line. She slid the page to the center of the table. I have been lifting my finger for 6 years. I didn't tell you because nobody asked, and because I learned a long time ago that what I say in this family gets dismissed. She paused. That's what lifting a finger looks like. She did not look at her mother. She did not look at her father. She looked at Amy. Amy looked up. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from the pressure of something that was about to happen, and then didn't. Her mouth opened. The room waited. Nothing came out. Not a word. Rachel watched her for 3 seconds. She understood completely. She was done. Carol opened her mouth. Gary turned toward the window at the backyard, at nothing, at the frost on the December grass, where there was never anything to look at. Aunt Barb's hand went to her mouth. Rachel closed the folder, slid it back in the bag. We're done here. She picked up her coat. She walked to the counter and lifted the green bean casserole dish, her name still on the masking tape, because she had made it and it was hers, and she was not leaving it at this table. Merry Christmas, she said at the door. She pulled it shut behind her. Not a slam. The soft, deliberate click of a latch. She stood on the porch. 3 seconds. The street had gone quiet the way Columbus streets go quiet on Christmas afternoon, everyone indoors, the neighborhood holding its breath. Across the road, one string of lights kept blinking. On and off, the patient rhythm of something that had already been corrected and didn't know it yet. She walked to her car. She sat in the driver's seat for 2 minutes before she started the engine. She did not cry. She is not someone who cries in cars, or in general, or at least not where it can be observed and cataloged and mentioned later. She sat with her hands in her lap, and the green bean casserole dish on the passenger seat still warm, faintly, and she did not think about anything in particular for 2 minutes. Then she took out her phone. Margaret Hollis had been her attorney at Hollis & Crane for 4 years. Estate planning, mostly a will, a beneficiary update after her last promotion. Nothing dramatic. The office was closed for the holiday, which Rachel had anticipated. She called anyway and left a voicemail. Margaret, it's Rachel Mitchell. I need to set up a direct trust for 2 minors, Lily and Jake Holt. I'll come in after the holiday. I have all the documentation. She hung up. She started the engine. She drove 2 blocks before she pulled into the CVS parking lot because she was not ready to drive home yet. And a CVS parking lot on Christmas afternoon is one of the few places in Columbus where nobody will think twice about a woman sitting in her car alone. She typed the text to Amy 3 times. The first draft ran 6 sentences and said too much. The second was 1 sentence and said nothing. The third was what she sent. The trust is set up for Lily and Jake. Hollis and Crane will contact you with paperwork. The kids are covered. I won't be continuing the informal arrangement. She read it once. She sent it. She put the phone face down on the passenger seat, next to the casserole dish, and sat there while the engine ran and the CVS sign blinked in the gray afternoon light. Amy did not call that night. She didn't call on the 26th either. Rachel went to work on the 26th. The hospital ran with a skeleton crew, and there were always claims that had backed up over the holiday, and she processed 47 of them and ate her lunch at her desk, and drove home at 6:30. On the 27th at 11 in the morning, her phone rang. Amy's name on the screen. Rachel looked at it. She counted the rings 4, 5, 6, and she let it go to voicemail. She did not listen to the voicemail, not that day. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. The spreadsheet was still there, all 6 years of it, 147 pages, every line she'd entered and every note she'd added to the notes column, the whole documented architecture of a life she'd funded from a distance and in silence. She looked at it for a moment. Then she right-clicked the file and moved it to a folder she created and labeled Closed. She did not delete it. It was documentation. Documentation does not get deleted. She opened a new tab. Best time to visit Portugal in February. 6 years ago, she had opened a spreadsheet and typed the first line, January $3,000, emergency housing. She had started a second track, a parallel life running alongside her own, the one where she sent money and kept quiet and smiled at Easter and said, "That's really great, Mom," on the phone while the wire confirmation was open on her screen. She had lived on that track for 6 years, and she had been very good at it. She was done being good at it. She scrolled through the search results. February was low season, mild temperatures, cheaper flights, the kind of travel information she had read about other places for years and never used. She found a tab on Lisbon specifically and read about the light in February, which was apparently what people went for. That was a reasonable thing to go for. She reached into her coat pocket. The drawing was still there, folded in quarters. She smoothed it open on the desk beside the laptop. Green and orange marker, Lily's colors, apparently, for a house with a tree out front and a door in the middle and 4 windows, 2 up and 2 down. Above the door, in the careful capitals of someone who had recently become proud of her handwriting, "Our house." Rachel looked at it. The apartment on Indianola Avenue, the 2nd floor, the parking spot, the good bones. Amy's apartment, which had a down payment that came from a folder in a black canvas tote with a frayed handle, and which Lily had drawn for her aunt in green and orange without knowing any of that, because Lily was 7, and it was her house, and that was enough. Rachel set the drawing on the desk. She did not know what she would do with it. She did not have to decide tonight. She booked the flights to Lisbon, February 7th, returning the 17th, 10 days. Non-stop from Columbus to Newark, Newark to Lisbon, $212 each way with a carry-on included. She entered her credit card number. She reviewed the itinerary. She confirmed the booking. The confirmation email arrived in 11 seconds. She read it once and closed the tab. For the first time in a very long time, the money I spent was for me. If you have ever been the one who handles things while someone else gets the credit, you already know what Rachel's 6 years cost. Not just the money, the silence, the smiling at Easter, "That's really great, Mom," while the wire confirmation sat open on your screen. Here is what this story is really about. Doing something good in secret does not mean you owe anyone your silence forever. The folder was not revenge. It was a record proof that love existed even when nobody saw it, even when the people who benefited most looked you in the eye at Thanksgiving and looked away first. You are allowed to stop carrying something that nobody acknowledged you were carrying. You are allowed to close the tab. You are allowed to book the flight. And here is the question worth sitting with. Is there someone in your life right now who handles everything quietly, who says "I'm fine" on the phone, who shows up with the casserole and never asks for anything? When did you last really look at them, not look away? Because the people who hold things together are usually the last ones anyone thinks to thank, until they stop.